The crimson sun of Karvos cast long shadows across the obsidian fortress as Kael Torin stepped from his diplomatic transport. The air was thick with the scent of volcanic ash and weapon oil, a stark reminder that he was no longer in civilized space. The Karvalan Confederacy had agreed to peace talks, but their terms were unconventional. Ambassador Torhen, rumbled War Chief Gorvek, his massive frame draped in battle-worn leather and steel. Scars crisscrossed his arms like a roadmap of violence. You honor us with your presence. The treaty negotiations will begin at dawn, but first, his lips pulled back in what might have been a smile. We have prepared a gift to seal our intentions. Kyle straightened his formal diplomatic coat, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. At 32, he'd negotiated dozens of treaties across the galaxy, but the Karvalan were different. They were warriors first. Diplomats never. Your generosity is appreciated, War Chief, though I must remind you that my government's policies— Thara! Gorvek's bellow echoed off the stone walls. The sound of boots on metal rang through the corridor like a war drum. When she appeared, Kael's breath caught in his throat. Thara Velkane stood nearly 7 feet tall, her muscled frame encased in form-fitting battle armor that bore the dents and scratches of countless conflicts. Raven black hair was braided with small bones, trophies from fallen enemies. Her skin held the deep bronze hue of her people, marked with ritual scars that spoke of rank and prowess. But it was her eyes that struck him most, pale amber, burning with intelligence and barely contained fury. This, Gorvek announced with evident pride, is my finest warrior. Thara has never been defeated in single combat. 57 victories, 0 defeats. And now, she is yours. The silence stretched like a blade's edge. Thara's gaze fixed on Kael with open contempt, her hand resting casually on the hilt of her energy blade. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of avalanches. I will never kneel to a soft-skinned man. Each word was precise, deadly. You are not my equal. You are not my mate, you are nothing but meat wrapped in pretty cloth. Heat flooded Kael's cheeks as nearby warriors chuckled. He forced his voice to remain steady. With respect, I didn't come here seeking a bride. I came to prevent a war. Thara laughed, a sound like breaking glass. War? You think your people could threaten us? I could snap your neck with my bare hands before you drew breath to scream. She stepped closer, towering over him. But our customs demand I be given as tribute. So here I stand, chained to a weakling, who probably can't even lift my sword. Perhaps, Gorvek interjected smoothly, you would care to demonstrate the weight of Karvalan steel? Before Kael could protest, Thara drew her blade, 6 feet of gleaming metal that hummed with contained energy. She offered it hilt first, challenge blazing in her eyes. The weapon was beautiful and terrible, its grip worn, smooth by her hands alone. Kael accepted it, surprised by its perfect balance despite its size. The blade felt alive in his grip, responding to his touch with subtle vibrations. It's magnificent, he said honestly. It has tasted the blood of 43 enemies, Thara replied coldly. Each death earned through strength, skill, and honor. What has your soft life earned you, little diplomat? The insult stung, but beneath her words, Kael heard something else. A test. This wasn't just about strength. It was about respect, understanding, worthiness. The Karvalan respected only power, but power took many forms. Perhaps we should discuss the terms of our arrangement, he said carefully, returning her blade. Thara's laugh was harsh. There are no terms, only reality. I am bound by law to be your bride, but I will never be your wife. Sleep with your eyes open, soft skin. The moment you show weakness, I will end this charade permanently. As she stalked away, her words echoing in the stone corridor, Kael realized his diplomatic mission had become something far more personal and far more dangerous. 3 weeks into his stay at the fortress, Kael had learned more about warfare than in all his years of diplomatic service. Each dawn found him in the training yards before the warriors woke, practicing forms he'd studied in stolen moments between negotiations. His hands, once soft from a life of paperwork and protocol, now bore calluses from gripping practice weapons. "You move like a dancer at a funeral," came Thara's voice from the shadows. Kale spun, nearly dropping his training sword. She emerged from the darkness like a predator, her own blade gleaming in the pre-dawn light. Even in simple leather training gear, she was magnificent, all controlled power and lethal grace. "I didn't know you were watching," he said, trying to keep his breathing steady. "I watch all threats." She circled him slowly, amber eyes cataloging every weakness. "Though calling you a threat is generous, you've been studying our combat forms for weeks. Why?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Kale met her gaze directly. "Because I refuse to be dismissed as weak without proving otherwise." Something flickered in her expression, surprise perhaps, or grudging interest. "You think learning a few sword forms will make you my equal?" "No," Kyle replied honestly, "but understanding your strength might help me find my own." Thara laughed, but it lacked her usual mockery. "Strength isn't learned from books, soft skin, it's forged in blood and pain." She raised her blade in a formal salute. "Show me what you think you've learned." What followed was less a sparring match than a lesson in humility. Thara moved like liquid violence, her blade singing through the air with deadly precision. Kyle barely managed to parry her strikes, each impact sending shockwaves through his arms. Within minutes he was on his back, her sword point hovering above his throat. "Better," she admitted, stepping back, "but still pathetic." As the days passed, their morning encounters became routine. Thara would appear without warning, critique his form with brutal honesty, then demonstrate techniques that left him aching and exhausted. But slowly, gradually, he began to improve. "Your people," she said one morning as they caught their breath. "They fear death too much. It makes them weak." Kyle wiped sweat from his brow. "And your people embrace it too readily. Doesn't that make you reckless?" "Reckless?" Her eyes flashed. "I've survived 34 years of combat because I understand death intimately. Every scar tells a story of survival." She traced a jagged line across her collarbone. "This one, a plasma cutter wielded by a Zarian berserker. He thought he could overwhelm me with fury. What happened to him? He learned that fury without control is just noise." Her fingers moved to another scar, this one along her ribs. "This from a duel with my own sister. She challenged my right to lead our clan's warband." Kyle's voice softened. "Your sister?" "Honor demanded it. She believed herself stronger, more worthy." Thara's expression grew distant. "She was wrong. But she died with courage. I gave her warrior's rights and took her place as she would have wanted." For the first time, Kale saw past the warrior's mask to the woman beneath. Someone who carried the weight of duty and loss, who understood the true cost of strength. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Don't be." She chose her path, as I chose mine. Thara's gaze sharpened. "As you must choose yours. The treaty negotiations end in 3 days. Gorvik expects you to formally claim me as your bride then, or forfeit the alliance. And if I refuse? Then I remain unclaimed, a disgrace to my people and my family." She stood, shouldering her weapons. But perhaps that would be for the best. A soft diplomat could never satisfy a warrior's needs. That evening, alone in his quarters, Kale found himself studying not just combat manuals, but cultural texts about Carvalan mating customs. What he discovered both intrigued and terrified him. Marriage among their people wasn't just a social contract. It was a merger of strength, a partnership forged in mutual respect and physical compatibility. He thought of Thara's scars, each one a testament to her survival, her determination. He thought of the way she moved, like controlled lightning, and the rare moments when her harsh facade cracked to reveal glimpses of the complex woman beneath. 3 days. 3 days to prove he was worthy of more than her contempt. When dawn broke, Kale was already in the training yard, but this time he wasn't alone. A dozen warriors had gathered to watch, drawn by word of the soft diplomat who dared to court their finest fighter. Thara emerged from the shadows as always, but something was different in her posture. Expectation, perhaps, or challenge. "Last lesson?" she asked. "First test," Kale replied, raising his sword. For the first time since arriving on Karvos, he didn't fight defensively. Every technique she'd drilled into him, every principle she'd taught through pain and repetition, flowed together in a dance of steel and determination. He was still overmatched, still learning, but he was no longer the helpless diplomat who'd stepped off the transport weeks ago. When her blade finally found his throat, ending the match, the gathered warriors murmured their surprise. He'd lasted nearly 10 minutes, longer than some of their own had managed against her. "Better," Thara said, but her voice carried a note he'd never heard before. "Much better." As the crowd dispersed, she lingered, studying him with those penetrating, amber eyes. 2 days remain, soft-skinned, don't waste them. The proving ground fell silent as Kale stepped onto the blood-stained sand. Every warrior in the fortress had gathered for this moment, the formal challenge that would determine his worthiness. Ancient braziers cast dancing shadows across the circular arena, their flames reflecting off weapons and armor worn by generations of fighters. Thara stood at the opposite end of the ring, magnificent in her full battle regalia. Her armor gleamed like obsidian, each piece fitted perfectly to her powerful frame. Twin blades hung at her sides, her primary weapon and the ceremonial blade used only for formal duels. Her hair was bound in intricate war braids, woven with the small bones of her victories. War Chief Gorvek raised his massive hand for silence. His voice boomed across the arena. "By ancient law and sacred custom, the worthiness of this union shall be tested in combat. Thara Velkani, undefeated blade of the 7th House, faces Kale Torin of Terra. Victory belongs to the first to yield, fall, or die." Kale's heart hammered against his ribs, but his hands remained steady as he drew his borrowed blade. The weapon felt familiar now, an extension of his will rather than an alien tool. Across the sand, Thara's amber eyes met his, unreadable as polished stone. "I offer you one final chance," she called out loud enough for all to hear. "Yield now and leave with your dignity intact. Face me and discover why I have never known defeat." "I didn't come this far to surrender," Kale replied, raising his sword in formal salute. "I came to prove that strength takes many forms." Thara's lips curved in what might have been approval. "Then let us dance, little diplomat." She exploded into motion like a released spring, closing the distance between them in 3 powerful strides. Her blade swept toward his neck in a killing arc that would have ended most fights before they began. But Kale had spent weeks studying her style, learning to read the subtle shifts in her stance that telegraphed her attacks. He ducked under her swing and rolled aside, coming up with his sword ready. The crowd murmured. Most expected the first exchange to end everything. "Interesting," Thara said, circling him with predatory grace. "You've learned to run. Now let's see if you can fight." What followed was a brutal display of skill and determination. Thara attacked with the ferocity of a storm, her blade seeming to be everywhere at once. Kyle gave ground steadily, parrying desperately, his arms screaming with the impact of each blocked strike. Sweat stung his eyes, and his breathing came in ragged gasps. But he wasn't just surviving, he was learning. Each exchange taught him something new about her rhythm, her preferences, her tiny habits. She favored her right side slightly when pressing an attack. Her combinations followed predictable patterns when she grew frustrated. Most importantly, her incredible aggression left brief openings for those quick enough to exploit them. "You fight like a cornered animal," she snarled, driving him back toward the arena wall. "All desperate scrambling and no honor." "Honor," Kale panted, deflecting a thrust that would have skewered his heart, "isn't about fighting pretty. It's about fighting smart." He feinted left, then spun right, using her own momentum against her. For the first time in the match, his blade found flesh, a shallow cut across her forearm that drew a thin line of crimson. The crowd roared in shock. Thera looked down at the wound, then back at him. Something dangerous kindled in her amber eyes. First blood to you, soft skin. Let's see how you handle mine. She became a whirlwind of lethal steel, abandoning all pretense of testing his skills. This was the warrior who had never known defeat, the blade dancer whose name was whispered in fear across 3 star systems. Her sword seemed to occupy multiple positions simultaneously, raining blows that Kale barely managed to turn aside. His strength was failing. His technique, learned in desperate weeks rather than lifelong study, began to crumble under her relentless assault. A thrust slipped past, his guard scoring a line across his ribs. Another opened a cut on his thigh. The sand beneath his feet grew slick with his own blood. But as Thara pressed her advantage, driving him inexorably toward defeat, Kale saw the opening he'd been waiting for. Her final combination was devastating, but predictable. A high thrust, followed by a reverse cut, then a killing blow aimed at the heart. She'd used it to end dozens of duels, except this time, he was ready. As her blade swept toward his chest in the killing stroke, Kyle dropped to one knee and rolled forward. Inside, her guard. His sword came up in a perfect vertical cut that should have split her from groin to throat, but instead stopped with its edge kissing the soft skin of her neck, just below her jaw. The arena fell into absolute silence. Even the flames seemed to pause in their dance. Thera stood frozen, her own weapon halfway through its arc, her eyes wide with something that might have been shock. For the first time in her life, she stared death in the face, not from a stronger opponent, but from one who had outthought her. Yield, Kale whispered, his voice carrying clearly in the silence. For a heartbeat that lasted an eternity, she simply stared at him. Then slowly her sword dropped from nerveless fingers to clatter on the sand. I yield, she said, her voice filled with wonder. I yield. The crowd erupted. Warriors who had never seen their champion defeated roared their approval for the soft diplomat who had achieved the impossible. But Kale only had eyes for Thara, watching as shock gave way to something else. Recognition, respect, and something deeper that made his pulse quicken. You didn't win through strength, she said as he lowered his blade. No, he agreed, extending his hand to help her rise. I won through understanding you. When she took his hand, her grip was firm, her amber, eyes bright with possibility. Perhaps, she said quietly, you are worthy after all. The healing chamber was quiet except for the soft hum of medical scanners as Thara tended to Kale's wounds. Her touch was surprisingly gentle as she applied biofoam to the deeper cuts, her calloused fingers careful not to cause additional pain. You could have killed me, she said without looking up from her work. That final strike, if you'd followed through, my throat would have been open to the spine. Kyle winced as the foam sealed a particularly deep gash. The point was never to kill you. It was to prove I could. Most warriors wouldn't have shown such restraint. Her amber eyes met his. Why did you? Because, he said softly, I didn't want to defeat you. I wanted to earn you. Something shifted in her expression, a vulnerability he'd never seen before. The great warrior, the undefeated blade dancer, suddenly looked uncertain. In all my years of combat, no one has ever understood me the way you did in that arena. You read my movements like poetry, anticipated my thoughts like a lover. The word hung between them, heavy with implication. Kale felt his pulse quicken as she leaned closer, her breath warm against his skin as she worked on a cut near his collarbone. Among my people, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper, true partnership requires more than respect. It demands intimacy, the complete joining of minds, bodies, and souls. Her fingers traced the edge of his healing wound. I've never wanted that with anyone before. And now? Kyle's voice came out rougher than intended. Instead of answering with words, Thara cupped his face in her hands and kissed him. It was nothing like the gentle brushes of lips he'd known in diplomatic circles. This was fire and hunger, passion barely held in check. Her mouth moved against his with the same intensity she brought to battle, claiming and demanding in equal measure. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Now," she said, her voice husky with desire. "I want to know the man who saw, past my armor to the woman beneath." What followed was a dance of discovery unlike anything either had experienced. Thara, for all her physical power, revealed herself to be surprisingly vulnerable in moments of intimacy. Years of being seen only as a weapon had left her touch-starved, hungry for gentleness she'd never dared to seek. Kale marveled at the contrasts of her. Skin like silk stretched over steel, scars that told stories of survival, muscles that could crush stone but trembled under his caress. She was beautiful in ways that had nothing to do with conventional standards, magnificent in her strength and breathtaking in her trust. "You're not what I expected," she murmured against his neck, her lips tracing the line of his throat. "I thought all off-worlders were weak, soft, without fire. And I thought all Carvalan were brutish, caring only for violence and conquest." His hands mapped the landscape of her body, learning every curve and hollow. "We were both wrong." She pulled back to look at him, her amber eyes liquid with emotion. "I've spent my life proving I needed no one, depending on nothing but my own strength. But you?" She touched his face with wondering fingers. "You make me want to be more than just a weapon." "You already are," he said, catching her hand and pressing it to his lips. "You're brilliant, fierce, loyal, beautiful. The fact that you're also deadly just makes you more incredible." Their lovemaking was intense but tender, a meeting of equals who had found something precious in each other. Thara's passionate nature revealed itself in the way she held nothing back, giving herself completely while demanding the same in return. Kale discovered depths of feeling he'd never known he possessed, driven to worship this magnificent woman who had chosen him above all others. Afterward, they lay entwined on the narrow medical bed, her head pillowed on his chest, her fingers tracing abstract patterns on his skin. The fortress had grown quiet around them, but neither felt inclined to sleep. "The other clans will test you," she said quietly. "My victory means nothing if you can't prove yourself to the war chiefs of the other houses." "More duels?" "Different challenges. Some will test your tactical mind, others your courage or wisdom." She raised her head to meet his eyes. "Are you prepared for that?" Kyle considered the question seriously. A week ago, he would have been terrified. Now, with Thara's strength beside him and her faith in his abilities, he felt ready for whatever came next. "With you as my partner?" He pulled her closer, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. "I think I can handle anything." She smiled, the first truly happy expression he'd seen from her. "Good, because tomorrow we begin planning our wedding. And believe me, diplomat, that will be the greatest challenge of all." "Why?" "Because," she said, her amber eyes sparkling with mischief, "you'll have to survive my mother. Despite everything, the pain, the exhaustion, the uncertainty of what lay ahead." Kale found himself laughing. Here, in the arms of a warrior who had become so much more, the future seemed bright with possibility. "I love you," he said, the words coming easily despite their magnitude. "And I love you, my clever, brave, impossible man." She kissed him again, soft and sweet this time. "My equal, my partner, my mate." Outside, the alien stars wheeled overhead, bearing witness to the joining of two souls who had found in each other everything they'd never dared to hope for. The wedding ceremony took place at dawn, beneath the twin suns of Carvos, their crimson light painting the assembled warriors in shades of gold and amber. Representatives from all 7 great houses had come to witness this unprecedented union, a human diplomat taking a Carvalan battle champion as his mate. Thara stood magnificent in ceremonial armor that had been worn by the greatest female warriors of her lineage. Intricate metalwork covered her from throat to ankle, each piece inscribed with the names of her victories. Her hair flowed free for, the first time since Kale had known her, a cascade of midnight that caught the morning light. Kale wore formal diplomatic robes modified with Carvalan elements, shoulder guards bearing Thara's clan symbols, a ceremonial blade at his side, war paint marking his face in the traditional patterns of a proven warrior. He felt the weight of hundreds of eyes upon him, judging, measuring, waiting to see if this soft off-worlder truly deserved their finest fighter. By blood and blade, by strength and honor, War Chief Gorvek intoned, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. We gather to witness the joining of two warriors, two hearts, two souls made one. The ceremony itself was unlike anything from either of their cultures, a blending of human diplomatic tradition and Carvalan warrior customs that Thara had spent days helping him understand. There were ritual exchanges of weapons, formal declarations, of mutual strength, and ancient words spoken in the old tongue that bound them not just as husband and wife but as battle partners for life. When the time came for their personal vows, Thara stepped forward, her amber eyes never leaving his face. Kyle Torin, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the gathering, you came to my people as a stranger, soft and untested. I scorned. You dismissed you, believed you weak. She drew her ceremonial blade, holding it between them like a bridge. But you proved that true strength lies not in the size of one's muscles or the sharpness of one's sword, but in the courage to stand when others would fall, to learn when others would despair, to love when others would hate. She turned the blade and offered him the hilt. I give you my sword, my strength, my heart. From this day forward your battles are mine, your victories are mine, your life is mine to protect and cherish. This I swear by the sacred steel of my ancestors. Kyle accepted the blade with hands that barely trembled, then drew his own weapon, the diplomatic ceremonial sword he'd carried to 100 peaceful negotiations, now transformed into something more. Thara Velkani, he began, his diplomatic training helping him project his voice across the crowd. You taught me that there are many kinds of strength, many ways to fight, many forms of honor. You challenged me not just to be better, but to be worthy of you, of your people, of the trust you've placed in me. He offered her his blade in return. I give you my sword, my mind, my heart. Your people become my people. Your cause becomes my cause. Your love becomes the foundation upon which I'll build everything that follows. This I swear by the sacred bonds of two worlds united. The crowd roared its approval as they crossed blades above their heads, the ancient gesture that sealed their union in the eyes of warrior and diplomat alike. But their celebration was interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected guest. The communication array crackled to life with an emergency transmission from the outer system. A Xerian battle fleet had emerged from hyperspace, their intention clearly hostile. The same berserker race that had scarred Thara years before had come seeking conquest, drawn by reports of a new alliance between humans and Carvalan. So much for a peaceful honeymoon, Thara said, but her eyes blazed with anticipation rather than fear. Within hours, the newlyweds found themselves in the command center, working side by side to coordinate the defense of Karvos. Kale's diplomatic skills proved invaluable in organizing the disparate clans into a unified force, while Thara's tactical brilliance turned their individual strengths into an unstoppable combined assault. The third squadron needs to swing wide around the moon, Kale observed, studying the tactical display. If they can get behind the Xerian flagship, they'll be trapped between our main force and the orbital defenses. Thara finished, her fingers dancing over the control interface. Brilliant. You see patterns where others see only chaos. And you see opportunities where others see only obstacles. He leaned over her shoulder to input the new orders, acutely aware of her warmth, her strength, the way she moved with deadly grace even in the cramped command center. The battle was fierce but brief. Human technology merged with Carvalan ferocity proved more than a match for Xerion aggression. When the last enemy ship fell burning toward the planet's surface, the celebration that erupted across the fortress was deafening. But for Kale and Thara, the real victory was simpler and more profound. In their first test as true partners, they had proven that their union was more than just diplomatic necessity or personal attraction. It was a combination that made both of them stronger. Later, in the privacy of their shared quarters, they came together with the passion of warriors who had faced death and emerged victorious. Their lovemaking was fierce and tender, hungry and gentle, a perfect expression of two souls who had found their other half. "No regrets?" Thara asked as they lay entwined, her fingers tracing the new scars he'd earned in their brief but violent marriage. "Only one," Cale replied, pulling her closer. "That it took me so long to realize what strength really means." "And what's that?" "Having someone worth fighting beside." He kissed her forehead, breathing in the scent of her hair, memorizing the feel of her against him. "Worth living for. Worth becoming better for." Thara smiled against his chest. "Then we are perfectly matched, my love. Because you have given me something I never knew I wanted. A partner who sees me not as a weapon to be wielded, but as a woman to be treasured." Outside their window, the twin suns set over a world where two very different peoples had found common ground in the love between a diplomat and a warrior. It was, Cale reflected, the best treaty he had ever negotiated. And it was only the beginning.